There is an eternal question with big consequence that gets asked a few times over the course of your life in ways that change the direction of everything, and then it gets asked in smaller ways every day. Am I going to live my life this way or this way? As I said, sometimes we answer that in the grand themes of our life. Am I going to live my life as a Christian? Am I going to orient my life as a Christ follower, or am I going to follow some other star? Then it gets fleshed out every day in smaller ways in other questions. Am I going to hedge or fudge or look at that website one more time when I swore no more? But how we answer the first, the ultimate, the fundamental question matters deeply. What is true north? How will I aim and orient my life so that even if I stray out of my lane, at least I will have identified my lane? What is my true orienting vocation? Well, the wisdom literature does much to focus on that question. Some of the Old Testament writings are identified as wisdom literature: Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, and others. Are you going to live your life this way or this way? It puts it out in stark, clear ways. And that is usually the question of wisdom lit. But the first teachers of wisdom were our mothers. They were the ones who pointed to the way of wisdom and the way that leads to destruction and made that clear for us. If John jumps off the roof, are you going to jump off the roof? You don't have to do what everybody else does, you know. And then, wisdom literature is not just the domain of the Bible. Every culture, every era has had some form of wisdom literature. Early in the founding of America, Benjamin Franklin published Poor Richard's Almanac, and it has that same flavor. It's wisdom literature. It's this or it's this. Fools need advice most, but wise men are only the better for it. Content makes poor men rich. Discontent makes rich men poor. Are you going to live your life this way, or are you going to live your life this way? Either or. Clear, this or that. And the biblical Proverbs do that too. The book of Proverbs: those who conceal their sins do not prosper, but those who confess and renounce them find mercy. You see, when the stakes are high, the wisdom literature usually creates these really sharp divides, draws things in big caricature-sized warnings. This leads to life. This leads to death. So that we'll pay attention. And in today's psalm, the stakes are really, really high. And so it said really, really loudly, where you plant your tree makes all the difference. It's written loudly. Psalm 1 is one of the few psalms characterized as wisdom psalms. It's part of the wisdom literature, and it strikes with that same stark choice. It's this or that. It's life or death. It almost yells at us with the clarity. There are 150 psalms, but they did not, of course, first arrive in book form. Across the centuries, they had to be collected and ordered. And so why put this one first? Well, in the Hebrew tradition, the most central part of Scripture is the Torah, the law, the first 5 books. But the Psalms are the hymnal of the faith. The law says, thou shalt not. And the Psalter is a kind of poetic expression of what thou shalt and thou shalt not looks like. And like other wisdom literature, the wisdom psalms often point us to a binary choice. It is this or this. The fool goes here, the wise go here, the evil take this road, the righteous take this one. It's plain, it's unadorned, it's clear. We know it's not simple. Living out the way of wisdom is never simple. But if we peel back and get underneath, we will find at the core that each of us has made some fundamental life choice about where we're going. Psalm 1 is kind of like a bridge with a flashing warning sign. It's a bridge, it's an entry point from the law and the prophets into the poetry of the Psalms, proclaiming that the wise meditate on the law day and night. But it's also a warning. There are 2 paths. There are 2 ways you can go. Choose wisely. It's this or that. Like a later poet once wrote, 2 roads diverged in a wood. You can't take both roads at one time. You got to choose one. The first road, if you take it, could mean you choose the way of the wicked. I was probably supposed to read The Great Gatsby in high school, but I didn't. About 50 years after it was written, Robert Redford starred in the motion picture, but I passed on that too. I was 11 when that came out. It seemed a little highbrow. I went to see The Man with the Golden Gun and Young Frankenstein, which also came out the same year. But in 2013, when Leonardo DiCaprio, that version hit the theaters, Melissa and I went to see the movie version. Well, I don't want to spoil this for any of you if you hadn't gotten around to it yet, but it's not like I'm telling the end of the Avengers movie. I mean, you've had since 1925 to read the book. Well, close your ears if you don't want to hear any of it. Nick, the narrator in the story, sees Gatsby's mansion across the water, and Gatsby's got it all. He's unnaturally handsome. That's why he's played by Redford and DiCaprio. He's obviously loaded. Beautiful women swoon in his presence. He's in love with a married woman, but so what? For a man of appetites, it's all about his needs and nothing else. He lives in a mansion on Long Island, throws outrageous parties for the beautiful people of New York. He lives the life of custom shirts and rendezvous and dinner at the Plaza Hotel and a yellow ragtop Rolls Royce. F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote the book in 1925, but the reason the book is a classic is that it is sadly timeless. Sadly timeless. The cars change, the custom shirt styles change, but the frenzy doesn't. The pursuit of the Gatsby life is one of the 2 roads the psalmist is talking about, and it's also by far the most popular of the 2 roads. Self-serving pleasure. And every era since the psalm was written and every era since 1925 has been marked by hordes of people who are just in search of satisfying the happy appetite. Self-serving pleasure, and I've got to have it now. I want my MTV. Wendy's, do what tastes right. L'Oreal, because I'm worth it. Now. And I said, the book is sadly timeless, because at the end of The Great Gatsby, it closes like every other self-serving life ends. At the end of the book, the narrator, Nick, and a few reporters are the only ones to attend Jay Gatsby's funeral, because in the end, he was like chaff that the wind drives away. In fact, that's how the psalmist describes people who take that road. The people who live for their own crazed satisfaction. In this first psalm, the poet psalmist makes his own stark contrast. There are two kinds of people, the righteous and the wicked, and he said the wicked are like chaff that the wind just drives away. Now, let's step back and unpack wicked first. We only use that term about the most vile among us, like Cinderella's stepsisters and Cruella de Vil. We also don't use the term righteous very much. It sounds a little bit extreme, and we don't talk about many people as being righteous. The only people you would call wicked might be like your younger brother or your ex. The only people who would you call righteous, right? But remember that the wisdom writer draws things big and loud with contrast we can't miss. And so the psalmist uses extremes, two different paths, two different ways of orienting life, wicked and righteous. And some people orient their lives towards selfishness and getting and hoarding and what is temporary. Their lives are defined by appetite, and it's so shallow. And in its extreme, it is pure evil. But most of us know it in milder doses. And in milder doses, it's the sad people you know who hope that the next get, the next happy fix, the next trinket will be the one that will satisfy the hunger inside. The other is the way of blessing, the satisfied ones, those who do not follow the advice of the wicked or take the path that sinners tread or sit in the seat of scoffers. They're the people who give, who seek joy over temporary happiness, who invest in things eternal. Their lives are defined by relationship and significance, meaning and blessing. And in its extreme, these people are called the righteous. But in the milder doses that we're more familiar with, they're the people you admire. The people who seem to live lives that are full, that seem to give and walk with the light steps of joy. Well, as I promised a few weeks back when I got back from the Holy Land, I said I'm going to sprinkle my sermons with a little bit of stuff I learned. Well, in some weeks coming up, I'm going to do a slideshow presentation, PowerPoint, something. Show you the pictures, but here's a peek in. Most of my pictures are some shades of tan. Almost everything I saw in Israel was tan. I'd look out the bus. On that side, there'd be acres and acres of limestone. And then I'd look out this side of the bus, and there'd just be tan, just kind of all over the place. Now, today, the Israelis are among the most advanced in the world at irrigation techniques, but in the biblical days, the water was where the water was, and it was not in many places. Southern Israel, then and now, mostly desert. Northern Israel, mostly tan. But some areas had water, life-giving water, and people who went to live there could grow food that would not only feed people this year, but next year they could grow food again, and it would produce food again. And this miracle was possible only in the places where there was water. And the psalmist says that those who pursue the way of wisdom are like trees planted by water. In a vast arid world, there are only a few places where people have found a source of nutrition and life and water and rooted themselves next to the water. And so if Gadsby illustrates one road, on this Mother's Day, I'm going to use my grandmother to illustrate the other. On Mother's Day, I'm grateful again for all the women in my life who invested, shaped, loved. But when I think about this particular passage, about what it looks like to be rooted next to a stream, I think of my dad's mother, Mama Hollingsworth. Her simple house smelled like country fried steak and okra. Her recliner sat next to a lamp, a floor lamp that had one of those little circle shelves in the middle of it. You've seen that? It was just big enough for the copy of the Greenwood Index Journal and the crossword she had pulled out of it and her Bible. Every morning, she read the paper. She pulled the crossword out, worked it complete with a pencil she had sharpened with a pocket knife. And she read again her ragged Bible. Her Bible ragged from use, because this routine was every morning. Every day she read the paper. Every day she worked the crossword. Every day she read her Bible. And every day she prayed. And when she bowed to pray, her root system went down, reached down into the place where the water flows. And every trunk and branch and flower of her life found food and refreshment and life, and she was ready to walk out into the world with grace. And she did. She walked with grace. Every word measured and kind, every experience felt, every person in her orbit blessed. Power, strength, kindness, beauty, because she planted her life by a stream. Most of Israel is tan. It's rocks and dust and chaff. But some places lush and green because there is a life-giving stream of water. So hear the psalm again against the backdrop of a land without much water, against the backdrop of all the Gadsby people you know who are not rooted at all. And on this Mother's Day, hear it against the backdrop of a woman you know in your life who is most fully alive. Happy are those who do not follow the advice of the wicked or take the path that sinners tread or sit in the seat of scoffers. But their delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law they meditate day and night. They are like trees planted by streams of water, which yield their fruit in its season, and their leaves do not wither. In all they do, they prosper. The wicked are not so, but are like chaff that the wind drives away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish. Well, the Lord doesn't wish that any of us would perish. That's why He gave us mothers, agents of God's wisdom who point to the way of life. But still, we make our own choices. We either plant ourselves in the shallow, rocky soil and follow a majority world that lives every day for nothing bigger than a shallow satisfaction, or we plant ourselves in places of nourishment, in prayer and community, worship and witness, Bible and belief, and we let our lives drink from the source of life. And the psalmist says it's an either-or choice, but it matters deeply where you choose to plant yourself. Would you stand and sing, respond, and pray about where you want your life to be planted as we sing the songs of faith?